Assalamu alaikum everyone. क्या हाल है आप लोगों के? सर आज 500 questions करा दें. चलो, we'll try and do as many past paper questions as possible, but definitely 500 तो नहीं होने वाले. I'm good, alhamdulillah. I'm good. Walaikum assalam. अच्छा, you guys can download this PDF. मैंने अभी इसको upload किया. This has past paper questions from 2018 to 2024. So please focus on range of composite functions, telling whether functions are increasing or decreasing. So this will be, inshallah, a comprehensive stream on functions. We will be solving lots and lots of past paper questions. Okay. So just sit tight. Sir, just started preparation. Sir, if I do maths seriously from now, can I still get a decent grade? But if you want to live if you want to live in delusion, then yes. But realistically speaking, it's not possible because you don't even have. You have less than a month now, so I don't think that's possible. So please cover transformations and reciprocal functions range. Yep, I do intend to do that. Don't worry. Acha. So before I start, I would really appreciate if you guys like the stream and also if you guys subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Acha, how much past papers to do? At least bare minimum, I would say 5 years. But even if after 5 years you're not feeling confident, you're not getting a good score, you're not getting good marks, or you're not being able to finish the paper in time, then do another 5. How long do you intend to stream? This will probably be, I think, 2 hours max, hour and a half, 2 hours. Let's see. Anyway, so I'm going to start. Achha, what I would advise you guys to do is, because functions is a very comprehensive topic, has lots of concepts. So if you guys don't have notes, if you guys don't have the functions notes, I would suggest you download the notes from the website mathletebysart.com. Okay, they're quite detailed and something that you can refer to here. So it has transformation, it has functions, has everything basically. Okay, so I would encourage you guys to download them, and they're available for free on the website mathletebysart.com. Okay, and download this PDF also, which has all the past paper questions which we're going to solve. Now, the one-to-one function f is defined by, so we're starting from May-June 2018, paper 1, variant 3. The one-to-one function f is defined by f of x equals to x minus 2, the whole thing square, for x is greater than or equal to c, where c is a constant. State the smallest possible value of c. So the way it works is that this is a quadratic function, and it's a very easy question. You might be able to answer it immediately, but let's dive deep and let's understand the concept as well. So how do you make sure that a function is one-to-one? It should pass the horizontal line test. And by the way, this is a good question, and reason why it's a 1-mark question is because there's not a lot of work to do. We can easily find out what the coordinates of the turning point will be. The coordinates of the turning point will be 2, 2. So that means we're looking at a quadratic curve which is turning at 2, 2. Okay? And here's something that I want you guys to make a note of, that in the examiner report, you will often find examiners saying that often students who make a rough sketch are able to answer the question correctly, are able to interpret the question correctly, and are able to answer the question correctly. Okay, so I've been reading the examiner report very often now, and I've noticed that not just in P1, but this happens in S1, M1, that the examiner will always say that it is encouraged. They're basically telling teachers to encourage students to make a rough sketch to understand what the question is, and then they will be able to answer the question correctly as well. Now, how do you make a function a one-to-one function? It should pass the horizontal line test. Okay, now what's the restriction? The restriction is that the domain should be greater than or equal to c, and the question is asking you to find the smallest possible value of c. So what's the smallest possible value of c after which the function is either only increasing or only decreasing? Well, you can see that from the curve, that is basically the x coordinate of the turning point. So अगर मैं, for example, अगर मैं इतना curve, अगर मैं आपको सिर्फ ये curve दिखाऊं, so this will be a one-to-one function. Why? Because it will pass the horizontal line test. At any point, if I draw a horizontal line, it will only cut the curve once. Or another way to identify a one-to-one function is that a one-to-one function is either always decreasing or always increasing. It's not doing both at the same time. That's not possible. अब ये जो quadratic curve है, ये दोनों कर रहा है. Decrease भी कर रहा है, increase भी कर रहा है. So if you want to make it a one-to-one function, that means one possible domain could be x is greater than or equal to 2. So what's the smallest possible value of c? That's equal to 2. Okay? Now, अच्छा, what's that? Sir, can O-level AdMath student? No, I wouldn't suggest O-level AdMath students ये देखें, ठीक है? I will be, because I will be doing stream for AdMaths also, so it's kind of pointless right now. अच्छा, what else? Any other questions? Sir, where can I get Sir's worksheet for O-levels? Go check out my stream. उस stream में मैंने description में worksheet share की हुई है. Alright, part 2 and part 3. In parts 2 and part 3, the value of c is 4. Find an expression for x, for f inverse of x and state the domain. Okay, so we have to state the domain also. Alright, let's see how we can find out the domain of f inverse. Achha, by the way, what is the domain of f inverse? The domain of f inverse is range of f of x. Okay, so the domain of f inverse is basically the range of f of x. You can download this worksheet. You will find a link in PDF. You'll find a link in description. Can anyone confirm if the worksheet is there? If not, I'll quickly upload it right now. Anyway, so we find the inverse how? By making x the subject. So y is equals to x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2. Now, let's make x the subject. So y minus 2 is equals to x minus 2 the whole thing square. Achha, let's write this nicely. So x minus 2 the whole thing square is equals to y minus 2. Now you take the square root on both sides. Okay. Now what happens when you take the square root on both sides? When you take the square root on both sides, you get a plus minus. Okay. The rule is that whenever you take the square root on both sides, you get a plus minus. So plus minus square root of y minus 2. And then when you make x the subject, it's going to be plus minus square root of y minus 2. Okay. Plus 2. And then when you do the final step, so f inverse of x is equals to plus minus square root of x minus 2 plus 2. Achha, here's the thing. Now we have to decide whether we're going to take the plus sign or we're going to take the minus sign. We can't just take both. Okay, now we have to decide whether we're going to take the plus sign or minus sign. Ab uske liye, dekho, here's my suggestion. Please don't always look for formulas, don't always look for tricks, don't always look for shortcuts. Okay? Sometimes you just have to use your common sense. Okay, and this is one of those questions where you just have to use your common sense. Ab ek kaam karte hain. The question is asking us to write down the domain of f inverse. Now, how will I write down the domain of f inverse? Let's go back. Now, the question said, so dekho, you're given plenty of space. So there's a good reason why you're given plenty of space. So f of x, if you go back, is x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2. And now the question says कि जो value of c आपने लेनी है वो 4 लेनी है. That means x is greater than or equal to 4. Okay? Now, if x is greater than or equal to 4, thankfully we've made a rough sketch. Let's see what is the corresponding y value. So if you plug in 4, what's the corresponding y value? Okay? So let's plug in 4 into the function. 4 minus 2 is 2, square of which is 4, and 4 plus 2 is equals to 6. Okay, so that means the corresponding y value is 6. Just a second. GoodNotes has started to really bother me now. Okay, so the corresponding y value, as you can see, is 6. Here we are. Achha, what's the range going to be? What is the range going to be? So if you're only allowed to look at this part of the curve, what will be the range? So if x is greater than or equal to 4, that means the range would be greater than or equal to 6. Okay, the range would be greater than or equal to 6. Okay, now What is the question asking for? The question is asking us to write down the domain of f inverse. Now we know from prior knowledge that the domain of f inverse is equals to the range of f of x. So that means the range of this would be x is greater than or equal to 6. But we still haven't decided one thing. What is the one thing we haven't decided yet? Are we going to go with the plus sign or are we going to go with the minus sign? So here's one way that you can do it. Now, notice that the domain is greater than or equal to 4, correct? That means इसकी जो range होगी वो क्या होगी? इसकी range भी होगी greater than or equal to 4. Now, how do you expect the range to be greater than or equal to 4? Do you expect the range to be greater than or equal to 4 if there is a plus sign or if there is a minus sign? What do you think? If the range is greater than or equal to 4, how do you expect the end result to be greater than or equal to 4? With a plus sign or with a minus sign? That's one way that you can identify whether you're going to go with a plus sign or minus sign. Okay, now here's plan B. Okay, there is a plan B. Thoda lengthy hai, but it will be, it's something that's going to work 100%. Now the domain is x is greater than or equal to, so basically the domain of this function was, the domain of f of x was x is greater than or equal to 4. Okay, now plus sign, yes, that's way to identify it. अब मैं आपको एक alternative way बता रहा हूँ, ठीक है? अच्छा, अब आप मुझे बताएं, give me a value that's greater than 4. Okay, give me any value that's greater than 4, let's say 5. ठीक है? अब हम एक काम करते हैं. Let's plug in 5 into the function. Okay, so this is plan B of deciding basically whether we have to go with a plus sign or a minus sign. So if you plug in 5 into the actual function, what happens? 5 minus 2 is 3, square of which is 9. 9 plus 1 is equals to 11. So that means when you plug in 5, you get 11. Achha, this means that if you plug in 11 into the inverse function, you should get 5, correct? So if I plug in any value greater than 4, let's say 5 into the original function, what do I get? I get 11. This means that if I plug in 11 in the inverse function, my answer should be 5. Now let's see. Let's test it out, whether it's the plus sign that we get 11 or whether it's the minus sign that gives us 11. So let's find out f inverse of 11. So plus minus square root of 11 minus 2 plus 2. So plus f inverse equals plus minus square root of 9 plus 2. अब आपका क्या ख्याल है? Is it the positive square root of 9 plus 2 that's going to give you 5, or is it the negative square root of 9 plus 2 that's going to give you 5? What do you think? Is it with the plus sign that you're going to get 5, or is it with the minus sign? What do you think? If I take the plus sign, so that means it's positive 3 plus 2. If I take the minus sign, that means it's going to be minus 3 plus 2. Okay, so plus 3 plus 2, that's equal to 5. Minus 3 plus 2, that's equal to minus 1. So that means we will not write the minus sign, we will write the plus sign. And the final answer is f inverse of x is equals to positive square root of x minus 2 plus 2. Okay, plan A is better, that's great. But there should be a plan B. Okay, so you guys now know what plan B is. If you like it, use it. If you don't like it, stick to plan A. Now, let's do part 3. Part 3 says solve the equation f of x equals to 51, giving your answer in the form of a plus root b. Could you repeat how you got the turning point from the equation again? Beta, turning point? So it's already in completed square form. So if it's already in completed square form, that means we can determine the turning point. If you want, you can differentiate it and then find it as well. But if it's already in completed square form, there's no point in differentiating it and finding the turning point. Okay, so f of x. Now what is f of x? Let's write that down. It's x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2. Let's confirm if it's x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2. Yep, that's correct. Now f of x basically means that you plug in x in function f. So that means x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2 minus 2 the whole thing square. Okay, and then don't forget the plus 2. So does that make sense? Let's see. So in place of x, you plug in x minus 2 the whole thing square plus 2. There you go. ये x की जगह पे आ गया. Minus 2 the whole thing square as it is, plus 2 as it is. Okay. And what is this equal to? This is equal to, where did this moderator come from? Okay. I think ये last year से moderator बना हुआ है. खैर, so just thank you for joining. Just please do your job. Now minus 2 plus 2 cancels, and now we have x minus 2, the whole thing square, which is being squared again. Don't forget the plus 2 outside, and what's that equal to? That's equal to 51. Okay. Now what do we have? We have x plus 2, the whole thing, power 4, which is equal to what? Which is equal to 51 minus 2, and that's equal to 49. Okay. Now remember, whenever you take the fourth root, any even root that you take on both sides, you have to write a plus minus sign. Okay, so any even root that you take, you have to write a plus minus sign. So we have x plus 2, which is equal to the fourth root of 49 with a plus minus. Okay, and then what is the value of x going to be equal to? X will be equal to plus minus root 49, root 49, fourth root 49 minus 2. But are we going to go with plus or minus? Let's see. What was the range of f? The range of f of x was greater than or equal to 6. Okay. And also, what was the domain? The domain was greater than or equal to 4. So obviously, we're going to go with the positive value, not with the negative value. So that means x is equals to positive fourth root of 49 minus 2. That's the answer. There you go. Okay. Now, sir, can you repeat the root part again? See, whenever you take the square root or any even root for that matter. So wasn't it x minus 2, x plus 2? Was it minus 2? X minus 2. Oh yeah, it was x minus 2. How did it become plus? It was x minus 2. Thank you for pointing that out. So koi baat nahi, just write plus in your answer towards the end. So this becomes plus 2, plus 2. Thank you for pointing that out. Could you repeat how we got the domain of f inverse in the last part? Domain of f inverse is basically going to be the range of f of x. Now I would strongly encourage you guys to download the notes, because all the questions that you guys are asking, the answer to which is in the notes. Okay? Or maybe watch those videos of functions in which I've covered the topic from scratch. Okay? Because if I'm solving past paper questions, I'm assuming that you guys know this already. Anyway, that was one question. Took us a while. Let's do another question. Let's do another question. Yeah, let's do this one. Question number 2. Let's see what this says. Functions f and g are defined by so and so. Find the points of intersection of the graphs y is equals to f of x and y is equals to g of x. So very simple. You're just supposed to solve them simultaneously and see what you get. So you get half x minus 2 is equals to 4 plus x minus 1 upon 2 x squared. Now, the question is asking for points. That means you're likely to end up with more than 1. So let's get all the terms on the left hand side. So we have 1 upon 2x squared. Half x minus x, that's going to be minus 1 upon 2x. Minus 2 minus 4, that's equal to minus 6 equals to 0. Now, let's see what do we get. Let's make sure. Let's multiply the entire equation by 2 so that it's easy for us to factorize. So we have x squared minus x minus 12 equals to 0. And now we can comfortably do middle term breaking. So minus 4x plus 3x minus 12 equals to 0. Let's take x common. So x minus 4. Let's take 3 common. X minus 4 equals to 0. So we have two values of x. So I'm going to skip a few steps because you guys are A-level students. I expect you to know this. X equals to 4 or x equals to minus 3. Now let's find out the y value. So the y value, I will just work it out directly. So plug it in the simpler of the two equations. That's basically the straight line equation. So half into 4 minus 3, that's equal to minus 1. So one point is 4 comma negative 1. And then the other point, for the other point, we will plug in minus 3. So that's minus 4.5. And we write the answer nicely, minus 3 minus 4.5. There you go. No, wait a minute. It's minus 2. Sorry, not minus 3. मैंने calculator में गलती से minus 3 लिख दिया. So this is minus 3.5 and this is 0. Yeah. It's actually half x minus 2. I accidentally wrote it as half x minus 3. Anyway, so we have the answer. There you go. Acha, is there any restriction? Make sure to read the question carefully. Nope, there is no restriction for x, so that means both points are totally acceptable. Now find the set of values of x for which f of x is greater than g of x. Now this concept is most likely heading towards a quadratic inequality. Okay, this is very likely quadratic inequality. Sir, is it necessary to round non-exact answers? Yes, of course. See, that's something that's given on the question paper. So अगर आपको एक instruction question paper पे दी हुई है, तो बेटा इसमें पूछने की बात तो नहीं है ना. Obviously, you're gonna round it off correct to 3 significant figures. So this is f of x, and we want this to be greater than g of x. So that would be 4 plus x minus 4 plus x minus half x square. Now no need to solve this all over again because you just equated the two and you found the point of intersection as well. Okay. Now when you equated the two and you got every term on the left hand side and everything, basically this is what you ended up with, right? You ended up with x squared minus x minus 12 was equal to 0, except now it's going to be greater than 0. Okay. Now you also found the solution that was x equals to 4 and x equals to minus 3. So that means technically now what you want is you want the range of x for which this curve is greater than 0. Okay, so no need to do it all over again because you know that when you take all the terms on the left hand side, you cross multiply and everything, this is what you end up with. Okay, so no need to do it all over again. What you have to do now is you have to simply identify what is the region that we want. So we want the part of the curve that's above the x-axis, which means x is greater than 4, okay, or x is less than minus 3. There you go. Okay, now part 3. Find an expression for f of g of x and state the range of fg. Okay, f of g of x. So f of x, first let's write that down. F of x equals to half x minus 2. Now let's write down g of x. So g of x equals, let's see, 4 plus x minus half x squared. All right, now fg. Fg means that we plug in function g in function f. That's what it means. We plug in function g in function f. Okay, so let's do that. 1 upon 2 into 4 plus x minus 1 upon 2x squared minus 2. Okay, so always make sure that you're aware of the amount of space that you're given. So I got x equals to 4 and x equals to 3. But you probably made a sign error. Okay, that's not the correct answer. Okay, you've probably made a sign error because that's not what the correct answer is. And irrespective of how you solve it, you should end up with the same answer. Okay, whether you multiply it by 2, minus 2, you should end up with the same answer. You probably made a sign error. That's why you're not getting the correct answer. Okay, so let's work this out. Half times 4 is 2 plus half x minus 1 upon 4x squared, and don't forget the minus 2. Okay, now what do we have to do? We have to determine the range of this. Okay, so we have to determine the range of this. First, let's simplify this. So this gets cancelled. Minus 2 plus 2, they just take care of each other. And what we're left with is minus 1 upon 4 x squared plus 1 upon 2x. Now, if you want to find out the range, there are many ways to do that. This is a quadratic curve. It's a quadratic curve which will have a maximum point. So you can find out the turning point by differentiation. You can find out the turning point through completing square. It's really up to you how you do it. I'll simply use differentiation. So if you do dy by dx, so that would be minus 2 upon 4x plus 1 upon 2. Now let's equate this to 0. Let's simplify and let's equate this to 0. So that's going to be minus 1 upon 2x plus 1 upon 2 equals to 0. So minus 1 upon 2x equals to minus 1 upon 2. So x equals to 1. Now that you have the x coordinate of the turning point, let's find out the y coordinate of the turning point. So for the y coordinate of the turning point, simply plug in 1 into the equation. So minus 1 upon 4 plus 1 upon 2 is positive 1 upon 4. Okay, so we have found the x and the y coordinates of the turning point. And what do they look like? They look like 1, comma 1.4. Now bear in mind that this is a maximum curve that we're looking at. Okay, this is a maximum curve that we're looking at, which has turning point, x coordinate of the turning point is 1 and the y coordinate of the turning point is 1.4. Now, what are you going to do? If you want to write down the range, f of g of x will be lesser than or equal to 1.4. That's it. Okay, so we found the composite function, we found the range, we found the turning point by using differentiation, and there you go. Since it's a maximum curve, that means this is the maximum point and every other point will be less than this point. So in coordinate geometry, is it necessary? Yes, it's best that you write down the formula and then do it. ठीक है? देखो जितना आपने कोई ये सवाल 5 दफ़ा पूछा, ठीक है? If I'm not wrong, जितना ये टाइम आप ज़ाया कर रहे हैं पूछने में, उससे I think 1/10 टाइम लगेगा आपको to make that decision and just write it and move on. Okay, so you wasted, I don't know how many minutes of your life for something that was really quite easy. So copy paste. What do you teach maths by any chance? I don't know what that means. Please use complete the square. But you can use complete the square over here, but now that you have done differentiation, at this point I hope everyone's done differentiation, so do differentiation and save time. Okay, you can use completing squares, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just I think it's a total waste of time. Acha, what's that? How do we know it's maximum? आप लोगों का second में को है ना paper, क्योंकि judging by the kind of questions you guys are asking me, it's not a good position to be in. So look at the coefficient of x squared. That's minus. What does that mean? That means it's a maximum curve. Okay, if it was plus, that would mean it's a minimum curve. All right, now part 4. The function h is defined by so-and-so. Find the smallest value of k for which h has an inverse. Once again, very simple. All you have to do yeah, I think cooked would be an understatement. I think you guys have evaporated at this state, at this point. Now, so remember, for a function to have an inverse, it's got to be a 1-to-1 function. Okay? It has to be a 1-to-1 function. Now, how do you make sure it's a 1-to-1 function? As long as the domain is up until the turning point, or as long as the domain is after the turning point. Okay, so that's how you make sure that it's a 1-to-1 function, and that's how it has an inverse. So here's the function. Let's find out its x coordinate of the turning point. Okay, so you will differentiate it. That would be 0 plus 1 minus x. Equate this to 0. So you have 1 minus x equals to 0. That means the x coordinate of the turning point is 1. Okay, so what we're looking at is a maximum curve which has x coordinate of the turning point as 1. Okay, everything else we're not concerned with, but the x coordinate of the turning point is 1. Now, how do you make sure that it's a 1-to-1 function? Either you could say that the domain is lesser than or equal to 1. We can't do that because the question has already said it should be greater than. Or we can say that x is greater than or equal to 1, which makes sense. X is greater than or equal to 1, which means the smallest possible value of k is equal to 1. Simple as that. Sir, M1 past papers. I'm streaming M1 tonight at 9 p.m. I'm doing work, energy, power questions, so make sure to tune in. All right, let's do another question. Let's do another question. Let's see what this is. So I only use completing square by equating method in quadratics and coordinate geometry for circles like you taught us. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. In circles, you can't use differentiation anyway, but when it comes to finding turning point, you can use differentiation. So might as well use differentiation. How would sir know get threshold? So I'm glad somebody answered that on my behalf. So this is a function, and we're supposed to express it in this form. Now, there are many ways to do it. You can do it by comparing. You can do it by completing the square. I think I'm going to opt for completing square. So minus 2x square minus 12x plus 7. Okay. So minus 2 common निकालते हैं. Alright, so we have x square plus 6x. Let's leave a bit of space, close the bracket, and then write plus 7. Okay? No, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not stressed. So you add the square of 3 and then you subtract the square of 3. Okay? अच्छा, I think अगर आप अपनी बात कर रहे हैं तो बिल्कुल आपको स्ट्रेस होना भी चाहिए, लेकिन अगर आप मेरी बात कर रहे हैं तो maybe not as stressed as you guys are. So x plus 3 the whole thing square and then minus 9. Don't forget कि बाहर एक minus 2 वेट कर रहा है, and don't forget कि दूसरी तरफ एक plus 7 वेट कर रहा है. So that means what does this look like? This looks like minus 2 into x plus 3 the whole thing square plus 18 minus 7. Now what's 18 minus 7? That is 11. Actually, no, wait, it's 18 plus 7. Yeah, so that's 25. So minus 2 into x plus 3 the whole thing square plus 25. अब एक काम करें, just write it the way the question wants. That's 25 minus 2 into x plus 3 the whole thing square. Okay. All right. Acha, anything else we're supposed to do? No. State the coordinates of the stationary point on the curve y is equals to f of x. So quite easy so far. Now what are the coordinates of the stationary point? Stationary point basically means the turning point. So the turning point has coordinates minus 3, comma 25. That's it. Okay. The function g is defined by so-and-so for x is greater than or equal to k. State the smallest value of k for which g has an inverse. Now remember, a function will only have an inverse for as long as it's a one-to-one function, and a function will only be a one-to-one function for as long as, especially if you're talking about a quadratic function, for as long as its domain is either after the turning point or before the turning point. Now here it says x is greater than or equal to k. So that means as long as the domain is x is greater than or equal to minus 3, it will have an inverse. So what's the smallest possible value of k? That's minus 3. Remember, a good idea is always to make a rough sketch. So we're looking at a quadratic curve. ठीक है, जिसके turning point के क्या coordinates हैं? जिसके turning point के coordinates हैं minus 3 or 25. Minus 3 and 25. Okay, it's a rough sketch. You don't have to waste a lot of time, but it will give you some perspective. All right, for this value of k, find g inverse of x. Okay, for this value of k, find g inverse of x. All right, so let's start by writing g of x as y. Now remember, if you're finding the inverse of a quadratic function, you have to, this is not optional. You have to first write it in completed square form. If you don't write it in completed square form, good luck trying to find the inverse. You won't be able to, basically. Simple as that. Now let's step by step make x the subject. सबसे पहले तो हम एक काम करते हैं. I don't like negative coefficients with brackets. So I'm going to shift this on the left hand side. So this would become 2 x plus 3 the whole thing square, and I'm going to shift y across the equals to sign. So that's 25 minus y. I shall always be aware of the amount of space that you're given. So x plus 3 the whole thing square is equals to 25 minus y upon 2. Okay, now we take the square root on both sides. And when you take this, how long? Stream will go on for quite a while. So x plus 3 is equals to plus minus square root of 25 minus y upon 2. And now x is equals to plus minus square root of 25 minus y upon 2 minus 3. Okay, and then the final step, which is f inverse of x. Actually, not f inverse, g inverse. G inverse of x equals to plus minus square root of 25 minus x upon 2 minus 3. Now tell me, are we going to go with plus or minus? What do you think? Should we go with positive or should we go with negative? Why should I choose the plus sign? Stream will go on for an hour and a half or an hour. Actually, no, not an hour, hour and a half. Why? You're right, we will go with the plus sign, but can you tell me why we're going to go with plus sign? That is correct. So basically, remember the domain of f. Okay, so if you remember, the domain of f नहीं बल्कि g बोल देते हैं, g of x was x is greater than or equal to -3. No, not because minus sign goes to imaginary numbers. No, not because of that. Okay, not because of that. So the domain of g of x was greater than or equal to -3. Okay, that means g of x. Okay, the range of g inverse of x will also be greater than or equal to -3. Now, how would you ensure that the end result of this function, the end value of this function or the range of this function is greater than or equal to -3? I've just rewritten it in a way so that it's easy for you to decide. Now, if I subtract something from -3, the end result is going to be less than or perhaps equal to -3. But if I add something to -3, then the overall range will be what? The overall range will be greater than or equal to -3. You can also use plan B. You can also use plan B. Okay? Now, please note, we're not rejecting the minus sign because it will be imaginary. No, the minus sign is outside the square root. Yes, if the minus sign was inside the square root, we would definitely do that. But here's how we decide. What should be the range of this? We know that the range of this should be greater than or equal to -3. Why is that? Because that is what the domain of the function was. Okay, so domain of function is equals to the range of its inverse. Now, how would you ensure that the end result is greater than or equal to -3? So this -3 is fixed. We can't do anything about it. But would you add something to -3 to get a value which is greater than -3, or should you subtract something from -3? So remember, no formula, no nothing, just your common sense, which will tell you answer, which will help you answer this question. Okay? Or you can also use plan B. You can use plan B also if you like. अच्छा, अब एक काम करते हैं. Let's do. चलो, let's do this question. वो composite function वाला concept ही हमारा cover हो जाएगा. All right, express 2x square minus 12x plus 11 in the form of a x plus b the whole thing square plus c when a, b, and c are constants. So here's what we're going to do. Take 2 common, x square minus 6x, leave a bit of space, close the bracket, write plus 11. Now you add something. Who will decide what you will add? The coefficient of x. That means you add the square of 3. Whatever it is that you add, you also have to subtract. Now this part of the expression will compress and become x minus 3 the whole thing square. Minus 3 squared is minus 9. Now please note that we are basically subtracting 3 squared. We're not doing the square of minus 3. No, we're subtracting 3 squared, so the minus sign remains in its place. Don't forget that there is a 2 waiting outside. Don't forget that there is an 11 waiting outside. So you get 2 times x minus 3, the whole thing square, minus 18, plus 11. What's minus 18 plus 11? That is minus 7. Is it? Yeah. Okay, now. The function f is defined by so-and-so. State the largest value of the constant k for which f is a one-to-one function. Okay? So if it's a one-to-one function, how do you make sure that this function is a one-to-one function? You make sure that this function is a one-to-one function by either saying x is lesser than or equal to 3, or by either saying x is greater than or equal to 3. Now, because the question has given us the lesser than or equal to sign, so we're going to go with lesser than. We're going to discard this. And what is the largest value of k? The largest value of k is 3. That's it. Easy peasy. Once you solve enough questions, you will reach a point where you won't be surprised by a functions question. Okay? Although I think in the February-March 2025 paper, there was a difficult question. Let me see if I can pull that. And let's see if we can solve that. But if you solve enough questions, you will notice that pretty much every question is a standard question. For this value of k, find an expression for f inverse of x and state the domain of f inverse. All right. Now, देखो कितना अच्छा सवाल है. उसने already हमसे completed square form में करवा लिया. Okay, so let's do that. So f of x equals, let's see what it's equal to, 2 x minus 3 the whole thing square minus 7. The circles question was not as weird as the functions question. So y is equals to 2x minus 3 the whole thing square minus 7. Let's step by step make x the subject. So y plus 7 upon 2 is equals to x minus 3 the whole thing square. So at this point we take the square root on both sides. So what should I go with? Should I go with the plus sign or minus sign? When you take the square root on both sides, you have x minus 3 is equals to plus minus square root of y plus 7 upon 2, which means x is equals to plus minus square root of y plus 7 upon 2 plus 3. And finally, f inverse of x. Let's see if this is f inverse. Yeah, let's see if this is f inverse. That's equal to square root of, so plus minus, we haven't decided whether it's plus or minus yet, x plus 7 upon 2 plus 3. Okay, let's see whether we're going to go with the plus sign or with the minus sign. अच्छा, एक काम करते हैं, अगर plus sign or minus sign में फैसला करना हो ना, if you want to make that decision easier for yourself, here's my advice. My advice would be that you write the constant first. Okay, that makes it slightly easier. If you write the constant first, it makes it slightly easier. Achha. Also, we're supposed to write down the domain of the inverse function. Now, how will I write down the domain of the inverse function? Let's go back. Now, the domain of the normal function is x is lesser than or equal to 3. And the coordinates of the turning point are 3, negative 7. So that means this is what we're looking at. Okay, so this is what we are looking at. We're looking at a curve which is turning at 3, negative 7. So that means what's the range going to be? The range is going to be greater than or equal to एक second. Okay, so please take some time out to make a rough sketch. Don't take this part lightly. This will give you some perspective. Minus 7. Now, we're only supposed to look at which part of the curve? We're only supposed to look at the part of the curve where x is lesser than or equal to k. That means हम सिर्फ इसको देख रहे हैं. Okay, this is what we're looking at. And if this is what we're looking at, that means f of x is greater than or equal to minus 7. Okay, so this is the range of f, which is equal to what? Which is equal to the domain of the inverse function. Okay, so remember, for f of x is greater than or equal to minus 7, and the domain of f of x was given to us as x is lesser than or equal to 3. Let's confirm if it was 3. Yeah, x is lesser than or equal to 3. अब मुझे एक बात बताओ, what would be the domain? What would be the domain of the inverse function? The domain of the inverse function would be the range of f of x greater than or equal to minus 7, correct? Now, what about the range of f inverse of x? The range of f inverse of x, although not us, but we're doing this for our own sake. We're not us, but we're doing this for our own sake. The range of the inverse function should be lesser than or equal to 3. Why? Because that is what the domain of the regular function was. Now, how would you make sure that the end result of this is lesser than or equal to 3? If you keep a plus sign or if you keep a minus sign? Which sign do you think will give you your desired range, which is lesser than or equal to 3? Think and answer. The minus sign. Simple. The minus sign. That's it. So that means we are officially going with the minus sign. That's it. All right. Sir, will you be watching the Jeddah F1 Grand Prix? Why would I be studying for CIs? अच्छा, अब इसका part 4 आ गया, जरा part 4 देखते हैं. So, अच्छा, by the way, I have a dedicated stream on this. Okay, domain and range of composite function. I have a dedicated stream on this. You guys can check it out. I'll solve this question right now. The function g is defined by g of x is equal to x plus 3. Okay, and for x is lesser than or equal to p. With k now taking the value of 1, find the largest value of the constant p which allows the composite function fg to be formed, and find an expression for fg of x whenever this composite function exists. Okay, so एक काम करते हैं. First, let's write down some relevant information. Let's write down f of x, which is 2x squared minus 11x plus 11. 2x squared minus 11x plus 11. Let's confirm that. Minus 12x plus 11, sorry. And g of x is equals to x plus 3. Acha, here x is lesser than or equal to 1 because the question says that k now takes the value of 1, so x is lesser than or equal to 1, and here x is lesser than or equal to p. Okay, now, so for this, there is a standard rule which I would like you guys to follow. Okay, there is a standard rule, and that is called redo. Okay, this will just help you remember what to do in questions like these. Okay, so R is basically for range. Okay, I is basically for inner, D is for domain, and O is for outer. Okay, this means that the range of inner function, okay, the range of the inner function must be equal to the domain of outer function. ठीक है, अब ये थोड़ा आपको complicated लगेगा, but this is the standard way of solving questions like these. I would suggest you learn this method, and you can apply it to pretty much any question like these. Now, the question is, which one's the inner function, which one's the outer function? So the functions that's inside is the inner function. The functions that's outside is the outside function. Now, how would you find the range of the inner function? You would find the range of the inner function by simply plugging in p. Okay, by simply plugging in p into this function, because it's a linear function, so all you have to do to find out the range is simply plug in p. Okay, so that means p plus 3. So what is this? This is the range of the inner function. Now, what do you want this to be equal to? You want this to be the same as the domain of the outer function. Now, what's the domain of the outer function? The domain of the outer function is lesser than or equal to 1. So that means lesser than or equal to 1. Okay, so I repeat. Range of the inner function, that's right here, is equal to the domain of the outer function. Now, let's find out the value of p. So p is lesser than or equal to minus 2. And what is the question? No, this is not a sponsored stream. What was the question asking for? The question's asking us to find out the largest possible value of p, and that is equal to minus 2. That's it. Okay, so remember this, RIDU. Range of the inner function is equal to domain of the outer function. Where did the plus 3 come from? What plus 3? But that's given here. Okay, so how would you find the range of this function? You would simply plug in p. Okay, how would you find the range of this function? You would simply plug in p. So p plus 3 is the range. Okay, now what should this be equal to? This should be equal to the domain of the outer function. What's the domain of the outer function? The domain of the outer function is lesser than or equal to 1. So you simply set it equal to that. And then you solve. And now what is the largest possible value that p can take? That's minus 2. Okay, now it's not over yet. The question is asking us to find out fg of x. Why less than the equal to sign? Because that's the sign over here. You want to make sure that it's equal to the domain of the outer function. What's the domain of the outer function? Lesser than or equal to 1. That's not possible, Hassan. It's not possible to find the smallest possible value of p here, because that's just going to be endless. How about we imagine a Venn diagram? And if you've done it some other way, then stick to that. I have no objections, obviously. But this is the way that I like it to do it. So yeah, I would do it this way. Acha. Now, this is not the end of the question. The question is asking us to find f of g of x. Now, in order to do that, I would use the completed square form, which was 2x minus 3, the whole thing square, minus 7. Okay, and here is g of x, which is equal to x plus 3. So f g of x would be equal to 2 into x plus 3 minus 3, the whole thing square minus 7, and that is basically equal to 2x square minus 7. There you go. अच्छा, अब एक काम करते हैं. Let's solve some of those difficult questions where you have reciprocal functions and you're supposed to find out the range. Yeah, one of these. Okay, now find the range of f and the range of g. अब देखो, I have good news and bad news. The good news is, okay, let me start with the bad news. The bad news is that there is no formula for this. Okay, there is no formula, no trick, no nothing. Okay, but here comes the good news. The good news is that you all can solve this question if you just use your common sense. Simple as that. Okay, so the good news is that you all can solve this question if you all use your common sense. It's really as simple as that. Okay. Achha, wait a minute. Who's messing with the stream settings? Just a second. I would like you guys to attempt this question. मुझे बस 1 मिनट दे दें आप. No common sense in the chat? Okay, so walaikum assalam. So let's start with f. Okay, let's start with f. So here we have f of x, which is equal to 3 upon 2x plus 1. अच्छा, मुझे एक बात बताएं. Okay, now here's a question for you guys. Think about it. Why do you think you're given so much space? For a 3-mark question, and you know, there is no algebra required, there is no plugging in required, you're not supposed to solve a question, but you're given this much space. Why do you think that is? सोचने वाली बात है ना, कि सिर्फ range मांग रहा है, and it's given you so much space. Yes, exactly. It's given you so much space so that you can use your common sense. You can exercise some trial and error. That's the only purpose. Okay. Not for sketching. It's not a good idea to sketch this. I mean, if you know how to sketch this curve, that's great, but I don't think you would. It's not something that we take out time and learn. So let's do some trial and error. Let's plug in 0. Okay, and by the way, you cannot plug in 0. Okay, so keep that in mind. You cannot plug in 0, but we're just plugging in to see what happens. So if you plug in 0, and you can use your calculator here. So this is equal to 0 plus 1, which is equal to 3. Maybe let's plug in a value greater than 0. So 3 upon 3, that's equal to 1. Let's plug in 100. What do you get? You get 3 upon 200 plus 1. So that's 3 upon 200 plus 1. There will come a time, okay, there will come a time where if you plug in infinity, what will happen? You will have 3 upon infinity. And what's that equal to? Imagine that you have 3 slices of pizza and an infinite number of people to distribute them amongst. What do you think will happen? What do you think each person's share is going to be? If you want to almost 0, right? Not equal to 0, like mathematically speaking, not equal to 0, but as good as 0. Okay, you'll probably get like an atom's share. Okay, so that is basically equal to 0. So what do we see? What do we see? We see that the largest value that it can take is 3, okay, and the smallest value that it's going to be equal to is 0. Okay, so that, and remember, since we cannot plug in 0, that means it cannot be equal to 3. Okay, the domain is greater than 0. So what's the answer going to be? The answer is going to be f of x is greater than 0, less than 3. Simple as that. Simple as that. ठीक है, कोई आपने फॉर्मूला यूज़ करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, कोई आपने ट्रिक यूज़ करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, कोई मेथड, नो नथिंग, जस्ट यूज़ योर कॉमन सेंस. Okay, now what if you have 1 upon x plus 2? Okay, once again, what's the domain? The domain is x is greater than 0. So you cannot plug in 0, but let's see what happens if I plug in 0. So this would be equal to 2 plus 1 upon infinity, 1 upon 0. Now 1 upon 0 is equal to infinity. If you add 2 to infinity, the answer will be infinity as well. Okay? No, not greater than or equal to, just greater than. Why? Because you cannot plug in 0. हमने 0 plug in किया just to see what happens. But because 0 is not included in the domain, so whatever output you get by plugging in 0, that will also not be included. Okay? Alright, I'll repeat. Because 0 is not included in the domain, that means whatever output that you get by plugging in 0 will also not be included. If, however, let's say this question was greater than or equal to 0, then this would be the answer. Simple as that. Then 3 would also be included. Okay? Make sense? If there was an equal to sign on 0, then we would include 3 also. Okay, so if you plug in 0, yeah, that is what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about. The greatest value it can take is 3, and then as the domain starts to increase, it goes to 0. Why would it not be less than? If not less than, then what do you think it will going to be? It's going to be. The greatest value is 3, and then as I start plugging in values greater than 0, the values keep getting smaller. So it's got to be less than 3, and then there will come a point where the domain is so big, as the domain increases, the end result decreases. Okay? So that's why it's between 0 and 3. Acha, ab let's come back to this. Now let's say I plug in 5. So what happens? 2 plus 1 upon 5, that's equal to 2.2. Let's say I plug in 100. So it's going to be 2 plus 1 upon 100, which means 2.01. What if I plug in infinity? So it's going to be 2 plus 1 upon infinity. What is 1 upon infinity equal to? What happens when you take 1 and you divide by 0? This is approximately equal to 0. Okay, this is approximately equal to 0. So that means the end result will approximately be equal to 2. Okay? Now what do we observe? We observe that the values are greater than 2, and as far as the upper limit is concerned, there is no upper limit. So in short, the answer is g of x is greater than 2. That's it. You can write less than infinity, but that's not how we write it. Greater than 2 is good enough. Okay, you can write less than infinity, that's perfectly all right. इसमें कोई हर्ज की बात नहीं है, but when you say g of x is greater than 2, that's good enough. Okay? All right. If you do that, that's perfectly all right. It's perfectly all right, no problem. All right, now this is an easy question. I'm going to skip that. Let me find some difficult questions, some more difficult questions. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. Why greater than 2? Why not? If not greater than 2, then why not? It will never be equal to 2 because it will always be something greater than 2. Because when you plug in infinity, what happens? Plugging in infinity leads to a value which is approximately equal to 0. Okay, not exactly equal to 0. 2023 P11 ka completing square was pretty weird. Acha, chale khair. Let's see what this says. On this diagram, Acha, what's that, sir? Please help. I can't find an answer to this question. S1 histograms where you have to do plus minus 0.5 classes to be. Yes, to calculate the mean also, you make sure that you use the continuous class interval. Okay, अगर आपने mean भी calculate करना है, तो you use the continuous class interval to calculate the mean. And you're right, I'm pretty sure you were unable to find the answer to that, but you used the continuous class interval. Okay, now part A. On this diagram, sketch the graph of y is equals to f inverse of x. Now, what's the relationship between a function and its inverse? Like, what's the graphical relationship? The graphical relationship is that they are a reflection of one another along the line y equals to x. Okay, so what we have to do now is we have to reflect this along the line y equals to x. So what will that look like? That will look something like this. And then we have to reflect this, so that's going to be something like this. Okay, now, sketching the inverse is hard, really? I don't think so. I beg to differ. So there you go. Just reflect it along the line y equals to x. That's it. Job done. Achha, it is now given that f of x is equals to minus x over... Dekho, I will give you a trick. Before you walk away from it, just ask yourself this question. Do these two look like mirror images of one another? Like, for example, if I place a mirror in between, do these two look like mirror images of one another? Yes, they do. If they do, that means you've done it correctly. If they don't, that means you've done something wrong. Okay, now, it is now given that f of x is equals to minus x over... Okay, how do we know where the mirror line is? The answer to that question is that a function and its inverse are basically reflection of one another along the line y equals to x. That's how we know where the mirror line is. Okay? Now, find an expression for f inverse of x. So let's make it equal to y is equals to minus x over square root of 4 minus x squared. All right. Let's see what we can do. So we have to make x the subject, right? So first of all, let's square both sides. So as soon as I square both sides, we get y square is equals to x square over 4 minus x square. Now we cross multiply. So we have 4y square minus x square y square is equals to x square. Let's get all the x squares on one side. So 4y square is equals to x square plus x square y square. What was the purpose of doing this? The purpose of doing this was so that we can take x square common. So we have 1 plus y square. Okay, what's next? Next is that we are going to make x the subject. So that would be 4y square over 1 plus y square. That's equal to x square. And now we have to take the square root on both sides. So as soon as you take the square root on both sides, you have x is equals to plus minus square root of 4y square, which if you want, you can write it as 2y. Okay, if you want, you can take the square root of that part over 1 plus y square. So be aware of the space that you're given. So we're given plenty of space. Now let's write down the final answer. F inverse of x is equals to plus minus square root of 2x upon 1 plus y square inside the square root. Okay. Now, question for you guys. Are we going to go with the plus sign? Sorry, not 1 plus y square, 1 plus x square. Are we going with plus sign or with minus sign? Help me decide. Look at the domain and tell me if we should go with the plus sign or if we should go with the minus sign. Okay, and I want logical reasoning as well. In one question it asks where the median lies, but in the or Dekho, Sadat, to answer your question, it does not make a difference, but it only makes a difference if the starting value is 0. Okay, if the starting value is 0, that is the only time where it will make a difference if you calculate the mean with the continuous class intervals or if you calculate the mean with the class intervals that have gaps in between. Okay, so the best practice is to first make it continuous and then calculate the mean. Yes, exactly. Good job, Hassan. Here we have no option but to use what? But to use plan B. Acha, plan B kaise use kare? Let's see. Both because, no, if you go with both, then it's no more a function. Okay, you can't go with both. It has to be either positive or negative. Minus के squared values give positive values. अच्छा, एक काम करते हैं. Let's go with plan B. Okay, so let's try plan B. Give me a value which is in between minus 2 and 2. You'll find out what plan B is. Plan B is a solid plan which will help us decide. Yeah, let's take 0. Let's take 0. Okay. So if I take 0, so what's f of 0? Let's find out. So that's, no, wait a minute. 0 is actually, अगर हम 0 plug in करेंगे फिर तो सभी कुछ 0 हो जाएगा. No, 0 is not a good idea. 0 is not a good idea. Okay, let's take some other value. A value between minus 2 and 2, let's take minus 1. Okay, let's take minus 1. So if you plug in -1 into the function, let's see what you get. So this is the function. In this function, if I plug in -1, let's see what we get. Just a minute. ये जो सारी वर्किंग है ये आप कैलकुलेटर में भी कर सकते हैं to save some time. Okay, but this is what you get. No, please don't skip the sign part. You'll lose marks. Okay, it's not something that complicated. You can use your calculator over here. Okay, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So -1 over square root of 4 minus -1 squared. So we get under root 3 upon 3. Okay, that means that if in the inverse function -1 से error आ रहा है, नहीं, आप probably कुछ गलत कर रहे हैं, that's why you're getting an error. You're not supposed to get an error. That means if I plug in under root 3 upon 3 in the inverse function, my answer should be equal to -1. Okay, now let's do that. So here's the inverse function. Okay, and in the inverse function, let's plug in under root 3 upon 3. Okay, you can use the decimal value also if you like, or you can use as it is. It's up to you. So plus minus, अच्छा ये काम ना हम कैलकुलेटर में कर लेते हैं. ये काम हम सीधा कैलकुलेटर में करते हैं. लिख के करोगे, it's gonna take a while. Let's just do it directly in the calculator. Okay, now, so where's the inverse function? Here it is. Okay, here's the inverse function. Pay close attention. So 2 bracket open, make a fraction, under root 3 upon 3, close the bracket, over square root of 1 plus, open a bracket, make a fraction sign, under root 3 upon 3, and don't forget to square it. Now what happens if I plug it in with a positive sign? What do we get? We get 1. लेकिन हमें क्या चाहिए? What we want is -1. So what if I plugged in this value with a minus sign? We get -1. There you go. Okay, so I repeat. If you plug in -1, which gives you root 3 upon 3. And why are we plugging in -1? Because we're picking a value which is inside of the domain. That means if in the inverse function I plug in root 3 upon 3, I should get -1. Now, which value gives me, is it the which sign actually gives me +1 or -1? The sign that gives me -1 is basically the minus sign. So what are we going to go with? We're going to go with the minus sign. Okay, so if I do it with a plus sign, we get 1. That's not what we want. If I go with a minus sign, we get, if I go with a minus sign, we get -1. So there you go. So f inverse of x is equal to, plan B जो है ना should not be a go-to plan, so it's plan B for a reason. Okay, it's plan B for a reason, because it's not your go-to plan. Your go-to plan is plan A, but if plan A doesn't work, then you use plan B. Okay, so I'll summarize plan B in words. क्या सीन है? सीधी लाइन नहीं बन रही. 1 plus x square. Okay. Plan A is, good question. Okay, what's plan A? For plan A is basically applicable in quadratic functions, where we look at the domain and we look at the range, and that's how we decide. So plan B is a more formal approach. Okay. So plan B is this. You pick a value from the domain. Okay, so we're talking about f of x. So you pick a value from the domain of f of x, you plug it in to the function. Okay, so if you plug in -1, this is what you get. Okay, which means that if you plug in root 3 upon 3 in the inverse function, we should get -1. Okay, that's how inverse works, right? Domain becomes inverse, domain becomes range, range becomes domain. ठीक है, यही हम इन्वर्स में देखते हैं कि अगर हम आउटपुट को इन्वर्स में प्लग इन करें, हमारे पास इनपुट वापस आ जाएगी. So what we're doing now is we're seeing whether it's with the plus sign outside the root that gives us -1, or whether it's the minus sign. Okay, so we're plugging in root 3 upon 3 and we're seeing whether it's the plus sign or the minus sign that gives us minus 1. So we do a bit of trial and error. We come to the conclusion that it's the minus sign. And this might seem as if it's going to take a lot of time, but you're only supposed to do it directly in your calculator and not supposed to show the working for this. And just write the final answer. That's it. Okay, now here's part C. Part C is the reason why actually I'm solving this question. It says the function g is defined by g of x is equals to 2 of x for x is greater than minus a and x is less than a. State the maximum possible value of a for which f g can be formed. Sir, please, upar wala message last. What was that? Coming to your stream randomly after someone since I'm glad. Did I miss anything? Okay, anyway, so state the maximum possible value of a for which fg can be formed. So what's f of x? Here's f of x. F of x is minus x upon root 4 minus x squared. What's the domain? The domain is greater than minus 2, less than 2. Okay, what's g of x? G of x is 2x. What's the domain? Minus a. Now what do we know about fg? So for fg to be possible, this is the inner function and this is the outer function. So the range of the inner function, what would be the range of the inner function? This is what the range of the inner function would be. It would be greater than minus 2a, lesser than 2a. Why? Because if you plug in a, so if you plug in positive a, that's going to give you your maximum value. If you plug in negative a, that's going to give you your least value. So this is what would be the range of the inner function. This must be equal to what? This must be equal to the domain of the outer function. So what's the domain of the outer function? The domain of the outer function is minus 2 to 2. So you can pick either this and solve for the value of a, or you can pick either this and solve for the value of a. So either way, you get the same answer. Minus 2a equals to minus 2, which means a is equals to 1, or you can pick 2a is equals to 2, which means a is equals to 1. That's it. All right. Now, is there more? Assuming fg can be formed, find and simplify an expression for fg of x. Okay, so fg of x. So fg of x will be equal to minus times 2x upon square root of 4 minus 2x, the whole thing squared. So fg of x is equals to minus 2x upon square root of 4 minus 4x squared. There you go. That's the answer. Achha, the question is asking us to simplify also. Okay. So let's simplify. In order to simplify, we can take 4 common from the square root. So minus 2x, and if I take 4 common from the square root, yeah, we will have a class for P1. Okay, the stream is about to end. I'm thinking of doing a part 2 of this stream tomorrow. What do you guys suggest? Should I do a part 2 tomorrow? Please let me know. Or you think this is enough? So if I take the 4 outside, what's that equal to? That's equal to 2. So minus 2 upon 2 into square root of 1 minus x squared. So 2 and 2 cancel, and what are we left with? We're left with minus x upon square root of 1 minus x squared. That's it. Job done. Okay, so chale, let's do a part 2 of this tomorrow, inshallah. I'll send a message to my team to announce. ठीक है, तो हम इसका part 2 भी कर लेते हैं. No problem. Increasing and decreasing function, decreasing function भी कर लेंगे. अच्छा, anyway, I'm going to stop here. Okay, we'll pick this up inshallah tomorrow. I am going to do a continuation of this tomorrow. I would advise you guys to download this PDF and solve as many questions as you can, so that in tomorrow's class we can focus on the more difficult questions. I had some other questions planned which I would like to solve. ये वाला question है. And then there is the February-March question which I would like to solve. And then I'll also include the domain and range of composite functions. Okay, so I did do a few questions today. I'll include a few questions tomorrow as well. So I'm going to stop here. Sir, when we draw histogram where we have made, I'm not sure I understand that. Okay. So I'll solve these questions inshallah in the next stream. Okay. So I'll stop here. See you guys tomorrow inshallah. I'll announce on my Instagram what time I'm streaming. So take care everyone. Allah Hafiz.